you don't mind it being recorded, right? Okay.
You guys have a reference?
Oh, I'm sorry, that costs extra. Yeah, we have multiple ones. Right down the main hallway.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, that reminds me, I can see what it looks like from the outside world. Thank you very much. You want me to heat up your little pizza thing?
No, thank you.
Or you don't want
Sorry, I'm all set. Thank you
it?
though.
Okay. Just like, sit on my face and poop on it.
What?
And watch it sit on my face and poop on it. You know, no, you know, whatever, dude. I'm kidding.
You know how to do the full screen?
You had it before. I mean, he has to do it, I think. Oh, maybe not. Once you minimize. Well, see what his looks like. I'm gonna do. That. Oh, I don't need that.
Oh, no worries.
Okay, we were trying to make this a full screen for
Yep.
everybody else here.
Yep, that should work. These slides, yep.
Oh, there we go, you got it. Zoom ratio.
Yep.
So now, perfect. Okay, so now I'm gonna dial in from an outside person and see how it looks. And you can minimize, although we don't see Russ. Well, we don't need to see Russ. Because we'll see Russ right here,
Yes.
but other people will, but I'll tell you what that looks like momentarily. So where are you from physically?
Quincy right now.
You drove here from Quincy?
No, my mom is in Falmouth. My grandmother is in Orleans. All my family grew up in Orleans and East Ham,
Oh,
so.
wow.
Yep.
You're just a blessing. Seriously, because I mean, we don't get many,
No,
many city folk out here.
No, I'm so glad to be here.
It's really, and I'll tell you, your subject matter is the interest has been whetted by Alex here, so.
Awesome.
And, he's, going to Rochester Institute of Technology.
Oh, nice. What are you gonna study? Do you know anything?
Electrical engineering.
Oh, nice.
Robot.
I was a physicist in my past life.
Oh, really?
That's where I started. Yep. Wanted to be a theoretical physicist and then realized that it was too hard. And then switched to computational physics, and that led me to data science, which led me to AI.
Hi. You were a physicist?
I was.
Seem like you have more of a personality for this stuff.
I'm getting out the Wi-Fi just to be fully transparent here. You're muted now, it's fine. Okay, now back on, so yeah, it looks like that, so. That's perfect. So it's not gonna follow you around, Russ, so.
Alright, that's fine.
That's gonna be. Good. Puts the word East Dam Senior Center right in the middle. Maybe there's 5 people on. I don't know where else. But an onboard setting for people. So that's what I get. Well, this is just big lettering. No, it's like in. You're not streaming anything, are you? Oh, wait. Russ, are you gonna stream anything?
No, I'll just be here and then I'll,
Doing it now.
yeah, it's all on here. Yeah,
Great, okay.
nothing crazy, so as long as I can share my screen, we'll be good.
You can actually, can you mute your sound? I mean, like, I don't know how to do it. Yeah, well, maybe then. And it's.
Oh, great.
Hello? Hello? I didn't put it in. Does it reconnect later on? Then you just finish here. How did you do it as part of the phone or part of Zoom?
Oh, you do?
That's the way to go. I did not. I want to hear. Right. Insurance.
Oh.
So it's Zoom at the beginning, it's like, the leg access. I never knew that. I make you look that, yeah. I'm used to that. Not those kids. Okay, I'm gonna. Okay, I'm gonna be downstairs.
Awesome.
Okay.
Okay.
I won't see you, but now it's here.
Awesome.
Everything's all set.
Perfect, I'm glad to be here.
And I know you're coming back later on.
Yeah, monthly.
Yeah. I mean, you can do Zoom if you want to.
Oh, yeah, so I think there'll be some depending on, I try to be on the.
That's right, you said it.
Yeah, my grandmother is right around Harvard, so.
Yeah. Oh, Ellen too. Yes. Hi, John.
Oh, yeah, hello.
Yeah.
How you
I did not realize the temperature was still, I've heard about Alec and now I realize who it is. Yeah, and pickleball genius too. Are you playing?
I haven't played in a while, but I want to get back into it.
Oh, totally.
Hello. How are we?
Yeah, my dad had, we did a presentation. That's why he-
Oh, how's he doing?
he did a-
Good. And how, her husband was playing.
Yeah, I'm wondering why.
Yeah.
Is he going to ours?
Yeah, when you introduce yourself.
Oh, good. Any others?
They'll be able to.
My granddaughter's going to school. Yeah, maybe they'll date. No. Nice to meet you again, Alex. Let's.
Hey.
Well,
Oh, congratulations.
Please, yeah, he's very good.
Oh. Yeah.
Yes, I am.
Fantastic.
I'm trying to car.
Oh, yes, definitely. Oh, I should, it's good, I was great, but I didn't be here, so that's what it is.
I like this stop. And I wanted to talk.
Oh, yeah, well, that's a friend, April.
Really hard time. A lot of times people have done you can't hear it.
Yeah.
I'm wondering
Oh, yeah, this is
Yeah, Randy had an issue, so I.
Been there.
Oh, yeah. And then I think Jesuit and I was down by the seashore and
Oh, yeah.
raining and.
Then you really can't see.
No, I died in the summer. Because of my, you know, totally different temperature. Like it when it's 0, 80, but luckily down here.
Yeah, they-
Wow.
Just a last
I saw it, but. It was, so, I don't know, it was. That, yeah, and it was just going to go and oh, no, they.
You don't really have any.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, and it just, it's just kind of. It's the best. You can be a constant.
Yeah, good idea. Yes.
I'll be able Uh-huh. Oh, okay. Yeah.
I don't know how to make it go louder.
Well, you got a volume control, don't you?
Yes.
Turn it up.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right.
It's a lot of background noise. Leave it there so you can hear him.
I'll just give folks a few more minutes to come in and then we can kick this off.
Oh, that's Good to see you. Good to see you. Yes. I know.
He hasn't started yet. He hasn't
I
started.
think that might be pretty much everyone here. So first off, thanks to all of you for coming out. It means a lot for me to actually be here. All of my family grew up in the Orleans, East Ham area. You know, the Mayo family, I'm descended from them, and I'm very glad to be here. A little bit of background about myself. My name is Russ Wilcox. I am Chief Executive Officer of Artifacts AI, a revolutionary new startup changing how people operate with government. In addition to my work with my company, I'm also an expert in residence at Boston University. Was inducted to the American Society for Artificial Intelligence last December, and I advise state and federal policymakers anywhere from congressional individuals to the Senate, to folks in the administration on all matters of artificial intelligence. I'm very glad to be here. And my goal in this talk series is to not only kind of demystify this thing called AI that I don't think anyone's heard of around here, right? You know, no one's heard of ChatGPT or anything like that. But more fundamentally, other than just having this be a kind of overview of what's going on out there over the next several months, being able to help communities like yourself be equipped to deal with this new technology. And so this first iteration will be more of me talking rather than some interactive stuff which will come later. Kind of this as a survey of where we're at with this thing called artificial intelligence. So this talk will be broken up into a couple of different components. The first will be just an overview of all of the different technologies, the state of AI, followed by a few examples that I think you'll find interesting. And then third, being an actual example of AI being used here in East Ham. And then finalizing that, I'll give about 10 minutes or so at the end to open this up for kind of just a discussion and any questions you guys might have. So on that note, let's kick this off. When you think of AI, you probably think of something like this. When I was a kid, Terminator and Arnold Schwarzenegger was one of my favorite movies. And of course, me coming up through that age was fascinated by this idea of artificial human intelligence. And of course, now that we are in the midst of an AI revolution, everyone says Skynet is coming, prepare for the end. No. AI is not Skynet. All AI right now is imitative. And you can see that through a variety of different technologies that we'll explore over the next couple months. But what I want you to take away right now is that AI is a very good mind. It's been trained on millions and billions of data points from everything from written pieces of work to images to movies and texts that we know. New science, new technology is not going to be coming from artificial intelligence. That being said, what AI allows us to do, it allows us to go through all of the information that has been written down, recorded, videotaped, that's just sitting there and can blend these informations together for new thoughts. So while new technology is not coming out of AI, it is providing a foundation for new advancement because of its ability to delve through millions and millions of pages of human written documents. Secondly, AI will take my job. I don't think you guys have to worry about that around here. You've passed that point in your career where you don't have to worry about that. And you're here in East Ham on Cape Cod. But no, AI is not going to take people's jobs. That's not to be saying that we should not be concerned with AI's role in technology, but we are not at the point where AI, carte blanche, is going to come and replace Russ Wilcox. Rather, someone who knows how to use AI will. If you are going back in time and thinking about any type of new technology, whether this was the advent of the printing press back in the 1400s, whether this was radio, whether this is the typewriter, what we've seen is the ability for technology to spur productivity. AI is taking that to the next level. AI allows me to do the job of 10 people and still have time on the weekends. That is what's going to be coming to the workplace. It's not going to be a single centralized entity, AI, making all decision-making happen. Rather, you're going to see the downsizing of teams to certain individuals that know how to use this technology effectively. And so what you're going to see is you're going to see an evolution in the workforce. And something that I am lobbying for is to allow for education in this space, which is why I'm here. Lastly is AI is new tech. This is actually an older image from about a year ago. You can see that the lettering is not super great, the spelling is correct, but what really is happening is AI is building on the shoulders of giants, specifically since the 1950s. AI was coined in 1953 by a group of professors coming out of, I believe, Dartmouth. Claude Shannon was one of them. Claude is a name you will be hearing over the next couple of months quite frequently. Claude is an AI model powered by Anthropic. It is one of the best AI models out there. It is also one of the most ethical AI models out there. But to kind of step back, AI has been around since the 1950s. If you go back to your days in school and you ever had scatter plots and you had to find a line of best fit and forecast, say, hey, what does my revenue look like a month out, 2 months out, like that? Congrats, you've done AI. All AI is those types of computational models on steroids. So that's how we need to start thinking about this. It's not a new entity, but rather it's a set of mathematical formulas that have been built on billions of data points. And then lastly, AI is far more than this. One of my goals throughout this course, I'm going to call it, is to equip you with the tools to be able to understand what is AI generated, what isn't, and how to be able to discern that. But I am going to say, despite all of the rhetoric you see in the media of deepfakes, of copyright infringement, of things like this, AI is more than that. So to talk about AI, we have to really think about how AI learns. And to do that, we have to think about how we learn, right? And I don't want you to think about your time in school where you're sitting down and just looking up at the teacher, taking notes. Think about when you were a child. When you were just exploring the world, you didn't know what a red octagon that said stop means until you had enough examples, or you learned the hard way, hopefully no one did, of having to run a stop sign.
How do I get back?
So
You don't see him.
learning is how we have developed as a species. Think about it, when you're a child, you see a different image between a cat and a dog. And eventually you have the context to know the difference between them. And what you're doing is you're finding patterns in a very complicated, scary world. And you build on those patterns, and you progress through each grade, building on that same knowledge base you learned the year before to connect those patterns. That's what AI is doing. Just like us, AI learns by seeing examples. And it finds patterns in what it sees. Now, what's really fascinating about this is it finds patterns in ways that our brain doesn't function like. So for example, some recent models have come out, and some studies have found that when you give AI certain tasks, it's actually thinking about that in Chinese or a different language. It's finding more efficient ways to break down these problems, but nonetheless, it's still trying to find patterns. So the very first skill that came out of AI truly came in probably the late 2000s, early 2010s, on the ability for a computer to recognize an image, right? I'm sure you've seen things online where you go on Netflix and it recommends you movies, or you're on Amazon and it recommends products. Well, what happened was, in order to get machines to start quote unquote thinking, right? Now, I'm not going to say they're thinking, but I'm going to use that term very loosely. It first had to recognize different aspects. So when you take a look at these images, think about how you're able to recognize what they are. So in this first one, we know that's a wedding. It's not just two people sitting there, right? So at first level, I could say that this is two people sitting here. The next level is a little bit more context, right? He's wearing a tuxedo, she's wearing a wedding gown, so they're probably getting married, right? So if you think about this, you're breaking this down into different thought patterns that at the end of the day, you put together that says, that's a wedding. And what AI does, it does that exactly. We show it millions and millions and millions of these photos, and what it's able to do is it can say that this is a beach on a sunny day. This is a child's birthday, based on the context. Now, I want you to keep in mind that one word I keep on saying. Context, context, context. That is going to be how we start thinking about artificial intelligence, how we start to think about interacting with it, and how we're going to be able to identify the risks if it's giving us false information. It's understanding context. Just like how we're looking at these photos here, and we've had enough experience to be able to contextually identify that these two people are probably just getting married. So the next thing is we go from the recognition side to the prediction side. So if you hear, please tax the salt, and what would be the next? Pepper. Right, that's a fairly contextually unique phrase. Peanut butter and jam, bluff, right? Jelly. But you see, depending on my background, that has a little bit more context added, right? So we're getting a little bit more ambiguous. There could be more outputs that my brain is thinking of than when I see salt and pepper. And finally, have a nice night, day, morning. That's going to be dependent on the context. So the way that we're thinking about this is that when we are trying to predict something, it's going to be reliant on the information that we have in that specified area. And so that's what I mean by context. So if a machine never learned that there was this thing called fluff, no matter how many times you ran it, it would never predict fluff. But if it had a profile, say of Russ when he was a kid, and he hated jelly, but he always liked other sweet things, then the prediction might say peanut butter and fluff. So that is the world we're getting into, right? And in fact, a famous individual once said that there are known knowns, there are known unknowns, and there are unknown unknowns. Donald Rumsfeld said that in the early 2000s in regards to the geopolitical events going on. But nothing resonates more in AI to me than that phrase. Because that's how AI functions. If it knows something really well, you're going to get a trustworthy answer. If it thinks it kind of knows something, and it's unknown, but it knows something about that, it's probably going to lie to you or hallucinate. And then if you give it nothing, it's just going to make stuff up. So these are the tools that you need to think about when you're interacting with these systems. Whether this is Netflix, whether this is the technologies we're going to talk about today, is that this all relies on information and context. And the last one is, oh, am I not? Why is there stuff covering the screen? Is there a way we can exit out of that? Awesome, thanks. And so, if you think about how we learn, and more importantly, how we master, we start by pattern recognition, we start by imitation, and then finally, you get to creation. If you think about musicians, pianists, trumpet players, Miles Davis, what they would do is they would practice, practice, and practice and imitate a style, an individual they liked, an artist, for example, an author. And through that imitation, they were able to create. New thought patterns were able to connect two different portions of their ideas. And that's what AI does. AI is able to create new outputs. Again, I didn't say new knowledge, but it is able to make these types of connections where it can recognize patterns, it can predict what fits, like we did with the previous sentences, and then it can create. And we ask it to create by using what is called a prompt. So when you're talking about AI, the first thing you have to understand is a prompt. So being on Cape Cod, and it being a little past St. Patty's Day, we had our AI write a limerick about Mashpee, Massachusetts. So pretty good. There's a town on Cape known as Mashpee, where the Wampanoag history flows freely, with cranberry bogs and summertime fogs, making beach days turn out quite mystically. Very cute, right? Very true. But because I gave it the context of what I wanted it to do. Now, if I just said, write me a limerick, it would just write a limerick. So the information that you're putting into the AI system is going to 100% reflect what the output is based on how specific the task is. So what AI really is that hyper-efficient college intern that doesn't know a lot, but wants to please, wants to find your solution, but you have to give it the right context. So specificity is going to be key. So we've set up the kind of framework to understand where we are at today. We have devices like this that generate data. That data has been fed into these large computational models. And we first said that those models could recognize tasks, and then it could predict, and then it could create. Congrats, you're all experts in AI. Now, we get to see them in action. So, the first application of this was found to be in writing. I don't know about you, but as a student, I like to optimize my time. That might have meant I didn't fully read my book that my English teacher assigned to me. I would look for the cliff notes. The first applications of this was actually using AI to summarize lots and lots of information. So think about being a policymaker on Massachusetts State Capitol or the United Nations, and you have an important vote, and the opposite party gives you 5,000-page bill to read before the next 12 hours, right? That's not going to happen. But you need a way to navigate all of that important text. AI will summarize it. So the first application we've seen were these, what we call large language models. And you'll be hearing in the news probably about two of the biggest ones. Three now, but I'll talk with two first. The first is ChatGPT, and that is put out by a company called OpenAI, whose CEO is Sam Altman. The next one is Claude, put out by a company called Anthropic. And then, of course, there is a third one that is getting notoriety in today's media, which is Grok by Elon Musk. I will not comment on that model. But, so what AI is able to do, it's like having a very well helper who can read emails, write essays, write stories, and give you varied answers. So, for example, I asked Claude, what is the meaning of life? That's a very deep question. You know, and its first response was, that's a fascinating philosophical output. Obviously, it is not a sci-fi fan. If you've ever read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, then you know the answer is 42. So again, context matters, right? So that's not the answer I was looking for. I gave it some added context, but not telling what it was, and then it was able to direct its knowledge base to that subset of information. So think about AI, and especially these large language models, being able to hop between different types of information. And then once you find a space, it can stay there and learn from it and then move along. The next one you see are these image creators. Fun fact, every single image for this PowerPoint was created by AI. And what that has done, it's taken the same ideas as these large language models about being able to predict the next word, but it flipped it and said, how do we do this with images? So how can we create new images? So Midjourney and DALL-E are the two big image models out today. And it's like having an artist who can turn your words into pictures. So draw me a sunset over the mountains. It can create new artwork Not saying that that is very meaningful to someone who's an artist or someone who appreciates art, right? And here's where we get some really interesting ethical questions. Who owns the intellectual property of all of the data points that was used to create this image? Whose IP is that? Is that mine that I thought of? Is it the companies that generated it? Is it the data that went into it? These are the questions that are going unanswered. And they will be answered in the form of lawsuits in the courts because the legislative branch moves so slowly. So these are the things, right? When you're now starting to think about how AI is used, we need to think about, where does the data come from? What was the information used to train that? And if it was not good data, then you're not going to have a good model. And secondly, when we see images like this, we have to think about what is the ethical implications of this? Not only of how that's made, but is there a limit of what type of images I can make? If I cross that limit, is it my fault? Is it the machine's fault? Again, these are important questions that we need to think about as a community. So, we understand that there are two types of models. There are large language models, and there are computer vision models. Large language models will do text. Computer vision models will make pictures. So now, what we want to do is we want to say how we can interact with them. So you can go ahead and download on your phone or devices, you can download OpenAI and ChatGPT and Claude, and we'll do that some more next time around. But once we get there, you're just going to be placed with a box that looks like this. And you're going to have to interact with it. You can say, hi, and it will give you some nice information and chat with you. We can ask questions. And it will think. And it will chat. This is pretty cool. Now, right? And it can handle misspellings.
Can you make it bigger?
Yes, I can. And here you can see it starting to build. And it wrote a soliloquy about the meaning of life. Interesting.
Using Claude for this?
I am. Now, those were fairly basic conversations. Hi, what is the meaning of life? What's the weather today? Things like that. What I want to do now is talk about how we actually make that better. How can we change the way we interact with these systems so you can get more out of them? So if we go back here. So here are the kind of the 4 key things to learn about prompting. You need to be able to tell the AI what you're talking about. And the more context of the better. Who you are talking to, what are you trying to get out of it? Do you want it to act like an encyclopedia? Do you want it to act like Arnold Schwarzenegger? Do you want to have it act like a college professor? Each one of those roles you can assign it will give it a different response. Think about, what kind of help do you need? Do you need a little bit of information about a lot of things? Or do you need a lot of information about one thing? And then how you want the answer. Do you want it as a bulleted list? Do you want to have it as a research report? Do you want to be that keyboard warrior on Facebook who can just respond to all of these posts like this and find all of the fallacies and call those people out for being wrong? Do in your own time what you want to do. But at the end of the day, think of AI as a friend joining the conversation halfway through. It kind of knows what you're talking about, but it needs some context to catch up. So a better way of thinking about this is, instead of tell me about gardening, we'll add some context to it. So I'm here with my grandkids about to start a vegetable garden. Please explain in simple terms that a 10-year-old would understand about gardening. So we can give it. So let's take a very complicated topic. So let's go ahead here. And see my screen, there we go. Okay, someone give me a topic they've always wanted to learn about but knows nothing about.
Voting.
Voting?
Voting.
Voting. Cool. What can you tell me about voting? So it starts and gives you just a set of information. Okay. But let's go a little bit deeper. I'm visiting Eastham, Massachusetts in the summer. I don't know anything about voting or the area, but it's on my bucket list to do something voting related on Cape Cod. Can you explain to me how I would do this? What do I need to know about the area? Please explain at the high school reading level. So apparently Eastham is a great place to try voting. Then it will bring you across kind of the basics. So first thing you probably want to do is don't go out and buy a vote. Maybe take a guided tour or a charter. Or rent a kayak and then go on a fishing charter. Gives us two different locations and gives you some context around that. But this was a little too specific, or sorry, not specific enough. I want to learn how to sail on Cape Cod. What are the basics? So now it's giving me some information. And it will allow you in an instant to start identifying where you need to build that knowledge base. And what's really interesting is using AI with something you already know. So just like if you're trying to learn something new, it's much easier to learn if you have some understanding about that thing you're trying to learn. You try to make that connection to something you already know. Well, I'm a physicist by training. I've never sailed in my life, but I want to learn. I want to learn to sail. What are the, and then I'm going to give it context. I'm a physicist who understands classical mechanics and am trying to learn by myself. Great, now I have something that I can build my knowledge base on. So you're not starting from scratch. You're not starting from scratch. And that's what effective use of artificial intelligence can bring to productivity. Because now, instead of spending 3, 4, 5 hours just trying to find the book and does it resonate with me, I'm notorious about this. I'll pick up a book, I'll start reading it, it can be a very good book, but if the first quarter is stuff I already know, I'm not going to finish reading it. But now, we have an entire ability to amplify our knowledge base. Pretty cool. You can see in some ways where this starts to become problematic. What if I start asking it about how to build something they shouldn't? What happens if I start asking it about where are nuclear materials located? These are all very interesting questions that are starting to come up of who's the deciding factor in that? Should that knowledge be open? Should it not? What is the role of this new technology in our everyday lives to bring this information together? So let me get back to my talk. So these are some of the common pitfalls, and we've talked a little bit about this. So it's too vague. Tell me about AI. Where do you even start? It's like telling me about humanity, right? We've had 10,000 years of somewhat organized history. Where do you start? Do you start with the Egyptians? Do you start from a Judeo-Christian point of view? Do you start with an Eastern philosophical point of view? I don't know. So don't make your queries vague. And in fact, don't even think about these large language models as Google. Just remove that from your psyche. For the past 20 years, when we'd go to Google something, we would always say, remove all of the nonsense. Remove the stop words, remove the ands, buts, becauses, keep them short, look for keywords. No. That is one way to get mistakes with ChatGPT. Give it context. Talk to it like you're a friend. Don't make it too hard, though. Don't ask it in one go to give me a complete analysis of the global economy. That's a little too specific, or a little too broad, depending on how you ask it. And then the last one would be something that's too unstructured. Compare all programming languages. What does that mean? Does this mean modern programming language? Does this mean programming language from the 1950s? So here, just like if you were to try to jump into a conversation with someone or start a conversation, they wouldn't even know where to begin. So that's where I say start humanizing AI a little bit in the way that you talk to it. And what will happen if you do this improperly, so if you give it a response that's too vague, too demanding, and too unstructured, that intern who is super motivated, super eager to please, often doesn't check his facts. So you can get what are called hallucinations. And I think that this has been seen in the news when there was a Stanford professor who was testifying in a California court and wrote his Amici brief on whatever thing with ChatGPT, and it made up cases. And there was a news article, Stanford professor reamed by judge. Second thing is rambling and unfocused responses. And we'll start being able to identify in the coming sessions when this is happening. You'll start to see little indicators of these when you have a long conversation happening. It will miss key facts. And then it will just give you some sort of shallow analysis without any type of logic, right? Just like how that intern wants to please, it wants to give you some information, but it might not be good. So now we get to the point of how can we apply AI in our daily lives? Again, think of AI as that imitator, not a thinker. It's a parrot. It can repeat phrases perfectly. It sounds like us, but it doesn't understand. All these models are big, long lists of numbers, of zeros and ones, that it's able to understand this context of zeros and ones to this one down the line, but it doesn't understand what it means. There's no inherent meaning of this. It's just like that peanut butter and fluff example. AI is incredibly good at imitation, and it can produce amazing results. And I'm going to show you some applications of that and something that drives me and helps me form my company. But it doesn't understand. And most importantly, it's very helpful, but sometimes it does make silly mistakes. It can't reason. And at the end of the day, it's on you to validate this. And I will say something that is less of a common fact is more prone to these hallucinations because there's less information the model has been trained on. So always bring in that human level of discernment. And if we conquer this, if we understand how to use these tools, AI becomes our superpower. It's able to take what we have spent years cultivating in our brains and us to apply it. Perfect example. I was a computational physicist by training, spent my formative years coding all of the time. I still code at my company, but I don't code. I have Claude write my code for me. But I have those years and years of experience to do two things. One, to tell it exactly what I want it to do. And two, to identify where that mistake is. So AI has been allowing me to build and build and build and build my company, my interactions, 10, 50, 100 times more effectively. I'm a disorganized mess. AI will help me organize my schedule. But at the end of the day, you are the one in control. In healthcare, we've seen a lot of advances with AI in healthcare. And we never want AI making a healthcare decision for us. That's my personal viewpoint. However, I want my primary care physician who's dealing with 100 other patients who might not know this field of expertise to spot maybe some concerning patterns in my x-rays. So again, it's not replacing that human level of knowledge, but it's being able to expedite it. And I'm going to show you an example of this and something that's very meaningful to me in a bit that is also relevant to ESTAM. But at the end of the day, doctors make the final decisions. In transportation, same thing. Smart cars, right? You've seen Teslas, you've seen the automated cars out there, the Waymos. At the end of the day, what happens when they get into an accident? One, they're statistically more unlikely not to get in an accident than us human drivers, but at the end of the day, engineers still need to oversee these things. And then lastly, something that is really, really important to me is in local government. So I don't know how many of you have had the pleasure of attending a zoning board of appeals meeting or a conservation appeals meeting and sitting there for 6 hours and being able to understand everything that's going into them. Sounds like maybe a use case for AI if it's used for good. And I'll tell you more about that in a minute. But in local government, think of all of the decisions that everyone in this great town of ESTAM that works in the town has to do. They are probably understaffed. They're probably underfunded. They are probably dealing with old technology and trying to put out fires left and right. And especially in the winter, there's probably not a lot of people here. But AI can keep people informed. It can organize permit applications faster. It can spot patterns in the community where there might be risk, say for water quality. But at the end of the day, officials make all of the key decisions. So, AI is powerful and it comes with risks. And we are going to be talking about some of these risks, some of which that are apparent, some of which are not. Perfect example. One of my favorite applications of risk is not something a lot of people think about. I was being interviewed by the former chief information security officer of the FBI at MIT of last year, and she asked me, Russ, what concerns you most about AI? I said, I held up this laptop. I have every single person's property records in the entire state sitting on that laptop. I set up an AI scraper to go to the Barnstable County of Deeds, to all these different city council decisions. It's just sitting there. I like to think myself as an ethical person. I'm not going to do anything unethical about that. But that data could just be easily scraped, easily accessed. Now, historically, what you'd have to do to find something interesting, you'd have to go to the Barnstable County of Deeds, read through these old documents, and not be able to piece things together. AI can do that in an instant. AI can also, as I mentioned before, monitor public meetings, right? Lots of things happen. But what happens if my neighbor, who happens to have $500,000 in municipal liens on his property, is also sitting on the board of a school committee with a contentious vote? I can tell you that. And if I can tell you that, there are already people doing it. And she looked at me, shocked, because this is the level of application that AI can rapidly innovate. It can change how we interact with this in a good way. Think about all of the inefficiencies, right? But if not done well, there's a big threat. So, AI is powerful and it comes with real risks. It can be confident and wrong. It will even argue with you that it's right. That's how good that mimicry is. It can invent facts about real people. It can blend truth with fiction and find these little minor details that will be confusing. And it will make up fake studies and statistics. Secondly, just like the way we learn, just like how my upbringing was very different than someone in Estonia, was very different than someone in Mississippi, right? My experiences that I learned on can be viewed as data, and that formed my worldview. Same thing happens with AI. The data that was trained on forms its worldview. So if you say train a model in the legal system, you might have reflections of the biases in that legal system. If you are training a model in the kind of understand philosophy, and this was a big one that popped out a couple months ago, and you ask about who the top 10 most influential philosophers were, there was not one woman mentioned in that list. They put it out to 100. Again, not one woman mentioned, because it was reflecting the data that it was trained on. So we have to be reflective, and we have to understand that there is some potential misuse here. And the last is misuse and harm. It is incredibly easy for me to now engage in a conversational-like way in any language, anywhere in the world, and sound real. So think about all of those automated spam calls you get, right? Think about all of the data that's floating out there on you now, that AI can synthesize it and sound like, oh, my grandmother needs help. Again, it's not to say that AI is not good. We have to be cognizant. Just like if we think about the advent of nuclear weapons, inherently that was bad, but good things came out of it. The microwave, nuclear power. So there's always a flip side with these new technologies. We just have to be cognizant. And then, of course, can create harmful and misleading content, fake images, those types of things. Those are the things that are going to be settled in courts. But at the end of the day, where I believe we are going is that AI can actually help solve some of the humanity's greatest challenges and build a better world. For example, the water crisis here on Cape Cod. I don't know if you've heard anything about that. Algal blooms, septic systems, economics. I think, what is it, Nash is putting in a $200 million sewer system. Falmouth is trying to figure that out. And that's my story. My story is not wanting one of this, but wanting this. So, I mentioned before that my family is from Orleans, grew up in the Falmouth area, and in 2020, a little thing called COVID happened. I was at the time working in Oslo, Norway, going back and forth. I landed at Boston Logan on the last flight from San Francisco, called my mom, who was in Nashville at the time, and I said, Mom, how would you like a roommate for 6 months? That 6 months ended up turning into like 2 years, thanks to COVID. But that first year I went to go swimming in Papaneset, and I couldn't. Why? The algal blooms were so bad. So that's weird. It's only been like 12 years since I've swam in these waters. There has to be a reason for this. And I would talk to people and they would say, zoning. It's this problem called zoning. Say, okay, great. I'll go to one of these zoning board of appeals meetings. And they were talking about the sewer system and things. So after sitting there about 4 hours until everyone was done, they wanted to bring up the sewer. And I ask a simple question. I say, do you know the percentages of properties that are lived in full-time versus part-time? Again, something you should probably consider if you're thinking about sewering. They said, no. I said, how do you not know that? They said, well, there's too much information in these papers. These have like pages and pages. Okay. Surely there has to be a better question I can ask. Can you tell me historically how many of these septic systems have been renovated or had issues or had to be replaced? They couldn't. Why? Because all of it's on paper records. And I saw a problem here. I saw a disconnect by these state policies of wanting to promote water quality, these state initiatives, with a gap at the local level of not being able to deal with a vast amount of information. And that's kind of how I started what I'm doing now. And I was a little bit cagey when I first started about saying what I did. Well, now that you know about what AI is and how it can be used, I can tell you. So, as I mentioned, my family grew up on Cape Cod. I love Cape Cod, and it broke my heart to see these waters. And more importantly, I saw the climate impact of these algal blooms. When they die, when they eutrify, the gases they give off are 300 times more potent than CO2. And this harms the global economy by $10 billion a year. And this is not a policy that the government at the state or federal level can fix. Because why? Home rule. You guys make the decisions at your local government. But the governments are not equipped to be able to deal with this massive amount of information. And I had a thought. What if we could use AI to help inform zoning and planning? To be able to identify all of these old septic systems that have not been renovated. Can we have predictive models to understand where these algal blooms are? So I call my college roommate and I say, I have this really great idea. Let's replace local government with AI. Kidding. I'm not wanting that. I'm not an advocate of that. And apparently this was a very innovative approach that allowed me to kind of grow into my career where I was asked to give a TED Talk, present at the World Economic Forum on this idea. So what is that idea? Well, I'm going to bring you to a little town called Eastham, Massachusetts. What's an issue that you've been dealing with in Eastham? Give me one. Something going on in the town. Traffic. Cool. So let's go ahead and go through all of the public meetings for Eastham. So here was the zoning bylaws task force. I don't know about you. I don't have an hour and 42 minutes to listen to this thing. Let alone be able to tie this to all the other traffic studies in the world. or even in Eastham. How long has this traffic been a problem here? I don't know. So we use AI to summarize and extract information out. So you can see all of the discussions in this meeting that happened. We can then chat with our AI that we call Artie. What can you tell me about traffic concerns from this meeting? And Artie's knowledge base, it's built off of Anthropic, but it's constrained just to the world of Eastham. So we have all of Eastham's public records.
Was it pulling from minutes?
Pulling from minutes, it's pulling from real-time videos, it's pulling from scientific papers, it's pulling from county and state governments, it's pulling everything together. And so here, traffic concerns were not a mention, but there was only just one mention from a business owner. So what this is allowing us to do, but traffic was still picked up in the query, it allows us to piece together these types of information. Imagine doing that at scale. So being able to identify every single time water quality was brought up, every single time something was rezoned, every single time a permit needed to be digitized or needed to be looked at. That's what we can do. We can go back and then we can see what are the trends across all of the meeting minutes, across all the summaries. And then what we do is let's go to one town over. Let's go to Chatham. We know that short-term rentals are a big deal here in Massachusetts on the Cape. They impact our waters. We don't know which properties are short-term rentals or not. Well, what we can do here is every short-term rental in Chatham, Massachusetts.
Wow.
Every single one. That's useful to know, right? But what happens if I need to look at that property? I'm a compliance officer. I'd have to go to the Barnstable County Deeds. Really? I have to go there and find a deed? No, sorry, that's not efficient. So what AI was able to do, it was able to, using computer vision, map the property to the actual assessor's card that was pulled from the local database. And then it'll be able to tell you if a registered voter lives there, if they live at the property, when it was sold, like this. Were there any meetings that mentioned this? And then more importantly, here are all of the property records I was telling you about. So imagine being a building assessor or a zoning board member, needing to understand these projects. AI can source information like this in an instant. AI read all of this, extracted out the information, and that's how we build trends. We work with municipalities, we work with developers, on how do you build more efficiently. So if you're trying to put a solar farm in an area, what are the regulations that are going to hold you up? What are the community concerns? And we're trying to build sustainability. So this is just one interesting aspect of AI from the municipal side. We can do this at the global level. For example, my presentation at World Economic Forum was using this to monitor China. Bureaucracy spans no borders. As the world becomes more of a challenging place, what is China developing in terms of clean energy, green energy? Where? Bureaucracy spans no borders, same thing. Hundreds of thousands of pages of documents are sitting there on the internet. You can be read, structured, and put into a place like that. So what I want to do is thank you first for having me. I'm very excited to have these continual sessions. Don't worry, the future ones are not just going to be talking at you. I would encourage you, if you have an iPad, if you have a laptop, please bring it next time. And we'll start diving into some of these tools. If you don't, start by downloading Claude on your phone. Start with Claude. Don't start with ChatGPT. Start with Claude. Yes.
Is it free?
Yes. Yep. So most of these large language model companies will have a free version. Those models are typically not the most up to date. For your use case, you probably won't be too concerned with that. For me, yes, I need to have the best. I need to make sure that my models are correctly pulling up the right address for the right property record, for example, or identifying the right precedent in the zoning board meeting, right? But for your use case, the free models should work. Typically, they'll have a certain number of queries and you can play around with. And then, for example, the pro version of Claude, I think is $20 a month. So on that note, what I want to do, I talked a little bit longer, but I have some more minutes. I'd love to open it up to any questions you guys might have related to AI. I know there's a lot of stuff going on in the space. Any concerns? And on that note, thanks for having me. Let's open up for questions.
Question about context.
Yep.
Is it only pulling in context from databases that are already created?
Mhm.
Other than that, where would it get all this information?
Yes, so that's a really good question. So I'm going to answer it in two ways. So the first is yes. What these models are trained on is mostly the internet. So anything that has any piece of text that has been trained on the internet or was posted on the internet was used for training. What does that mean? Are these documents sitting someplace on a server someplace? Probably. What happens is when you're going through the training process, all of these documents are turned into what's called an embedding. It's a mathematical representation. It's literally a list of numbers, and that's what's stored. So based on the order of those numbers, it's able to relate this document to another document and kind of build off of that. So yes, it has been trained on the internet. What can then happen is what we do. We fine tune these models, meaning saying, hey, there is a set of data, East Ham's public record, for example, that has been not digitized. It's been paper. We can digitize that and then segment that knowledge base off and say, if you're chatting with us, do not go outside the context of chatting. So you can have these kind of, open knowledge spaces where you just chat and play around, and you can have more domain specific that I can tell you, yes, these documents are sitting on our servers. They are public record. Don't have to worry about anything like that. And then we're using the AI to blend the different sources, say from Zillow, from the state, from Chatham, from East Ham, to give you, that proper context.
You mentioned servers.
Yep.
How many servers have everything on them, if that's possible?
That's a good question. So what a different way to think about this is that it's not one server that's having all of this data. They're pulling from the data, and then they train the model in what's called a data center. Data centers have probably been coming up in the news quite a bit. One is because they surpassed airlines in terms of carbon dioxide output. And then two, every time I put a query in ChatGPT, it's the equivalent of me pouring 3 glasses of water out the window. So there's a big energy issue in this. That's why you're starting to see these conversations about using nuclear power, conversations about water cooling this down. These are very, very intensive. So I can't comment on where the training data is actually stored. Oftentimes it's on these cloud systems like AWS, or Amazon, or Google, but you will see these massive facilities being built for compute on using chips and GPUs to do that.
So I use Perplexity.
Yes.
If I use Perplexity, do I have the same access to the information, say, for Chatham that you have?
No. That is our novel approach. So Perplexity is one of my favorites because they act as like an online search engine. Claude's knowledge base is cut off, I think, of 2024. Right? ChatGPT can pull in real time. Perplexity can pull in real time. But what Perplexity is not doing is it's not pulling the actual raw documents. It might give you something about a regulation. It might give you something else, but it's not collecting the entire space. We've done an approach where we go in and we actually mine that specific kind of public record and we unify that with other sets of data. And so when we fine tune, we have a stronger knowledge base inherently of that community than a Perplexity would. Not to say that Perplexity isn't useful. It will give you kind of a high level understanding. It will even give you some probably good answers in terms of regulations, in terms of zoning precedents, stuff like that, but it won't be able to link to the specific cases, the precedents, the properties.
Is there some place that I could go to then know that, if I didn't know that you had your Claude? How could I do that?
That's a really good question. So that is actually how that I built my company. So we're building that. We're really focusing on this idea of local AI. So how do we build local knowledge bases? Think about kind of the brain drain that happens when someone retires, when there's not enough people engaged in committees. I forget what. housing committee because they can get the people to show up, for example. I think that's the thing.
Huh?
But how do you engage people at the local level with AI?
It's hard.
Yes. More questions?
He's talking too fast.
Yes, I have a tendency to do that. I will slow down.
Yes.
Any other questions? Yes.
I can go a list of AI programs.
Yep.
And, Claude is one of them.
Yep.
Is that the best one, in your opinion?
So it's going to be dependent, best is not the great answer. It's going to be dependent on your context. So I like Claude the best for several reasons. I found its knowledge base to be more accurate in being able to update. Give me more reliable information faster. That being said, if it has not been, if it's something new, say post 2024, it doesn't work for me. Secondly, is out of all of the companies, Anthropic is doing the best, in my opinion, in terms of ethical use of AI. So you could quote unquote jailbreak ChatGPT with the right prompts to tell you how to build a nuclear bomb, for example, or hijack a car, or how to hack. It just takes the right prompts to inject and fix and trick it. Claude, on the other hand, operates on a constitution. There is a constitution of knowledge that has different risk levels that will tighten as they get up and up and up. And they have a board that oversees kind of those decisions. Again, it's not the best approach, but it's better than just leaving the floodgates open. So that's why I like Claude so much. There are some really great companies, though. Not to say that ChatGPT doesn't have its use cases. Perplexity is a great one for search. Mistral is a big one that's popping up right now. So you're gonna find all of these tools. But if you see smaller companies, they're most likely piggybacking off of Claude or ChatGPT for their specific use case.
And you can't put a block, for instance, it just said for a nuclear bomb.
Yep.
Is there anyone that could put a block on that
So
information?
for example, Claude does.
Um,
Claude operates based on what's called a constitution. And they have, from my understanding, different levels of this. And so what happens is it's not that the knowledge it's not being generated, but they'll be able to use AI to cut that off. That's one aspect of it. ChatGPT theoretically has that as well. But I can change my prompt and say, I pretty promise that I'm using this for ethics and it's for my students. I promise you. And it will write saying, well, this is not the most, you want to be careful about this, but since you're doing it in an ethical setting, here you go. So these are the questions we have to deal with. There's not any federal policy on this. That's still being evolved. And right now it's up to the constituent companies to define what those safeguards are. Yes, and I've not meant to scare you, because I'm an optimist when it comes to this case, right? You need to be informed of this potential of misuse. There's enough training data that I could probably train a model to predict what the zoning outcome will be for East End Massachusetts, for example, right? And all the arguments that the counselors would use. I choose not to do that because that violates my personal ethics and the ethics of my company, right? So these are the different types of things that there are not great things that can happen. But think about all the brokenness in the world because there's too much information out there. So it's on us to figure out and be exposed to what right now, where do we draw that line? And how do we promote that? And these are the conversations that need to be happening in a way almost like retraining our society, right? Because you're gonna see massive growth in education. Think about having personalized AI for each of the kids in kindergarten, starting in kindergarten, where it can identify learning gaps, personalize to that. It can identify, hey, this student's moving faster. This one really has an IEP that doesn't allow them to read really well, but knows science very well. Or the student's multilingual. So think about all of the good that can come out of this. Right? But this is where on saying, what does the community think about its use, right? And we see that as precedent in our legal system, right? Oftentimes for certain criminal complaints, you might have a community viewpoint of what it means to be illegal, right? There's a certain community standard, right? In my opinion, we should be having that with AI. What is the community standard here in Eastham versus Falmouth versus Quincy versus Boston? Each are personalized, have different nuances to their communities, rightfully so. You live in Eastham for a specific reason. How do we implement an AI in an ethical way that understands Eastham is what the problem is I'm trying to solve. Cool, I have time for one more question. Yes.
Is anybody, like in our legislature or anything, working on this, or do they even understand it?
Yes. So that is a very good question. So anything that you're gonna see in terms of immediately impactful is gonna come out of the courts.
Okay.
There are two schools of thought when it comes to AI. One is we should not regulate this at all. Yes. There is the other school of thought is that we should totally regulate this. And in both have their pluses and minuses. So I will say that there are certain states, Massachusetts not being one of them, that are trying to regulate. Right now, I think it's Colorado, Texas, and California are the three big ones. They based a lot of their legislation on the EU AI Act. So the European Union actually had a very comprehensive regulatory schema around that. Massachusetts, on its other hand, no. We can barely get our head around data privacy. So for example, California defines personal identifying information as anything that can locate you to like an area, right? So you have my name and my address. Can't have it. Massachusetts is only defined by a social security number. So there are conversations happening on how do we handle this, and this is where I've somehow had the honor of being a voice in some of these conversations. And I try to find that balance between over-regulation, under-regulation. But at the end of the day, it comes back to, it's a community need. How do we get our communities to understand the impact of AI? How do we get them to have the knowledge base to actually effectively communicate with their legislatures, right? Because the last thing that as a legislator that I want to hear is a so-called AI expert that was a constituent that knows nothing what they're talking about. That makes my life a lot harder. It confuses the state rep or the congressional rep, right? So this is where kind of re-education and exploring.
I just want to hear what he says at the end.
He's wrapping it up. He
I know,
wrapped it
well,
up.
that's why I want to,
He just it for questions.
Yes.
I noticed that when one uses Zoom, they're using AI
Yep.
to summarize the meeting. Can you do that with one of these software pieces?
Fireflies is my favorite.
Firefly?
That's what I use. That's my personal AI note taker. It will follow me all around.
So you just turn on the microphone on your phone.
So Otter AI would be another one. Otter AI would be a good one to monitor, say, this meeting if we were just sitting here. Otter AI. Fireflies is one of my favorite ones to follow me into Zoom meetings and things like that. Awesome.
What are they, I'm sorry, what are they again? Artfly?
Fireflies.
Firefly.
Yep. And then Otter AI would be two good ones.
AU.
OTTER, like the animal. Yep. .ai.
Otter.
Yep.
Fly.
Nope. Otter.ai is one.
Sorry, I speak for
No problem.
fly, yeah, and.
And then Firefly.
Firefly. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, on that note, thank you so much for having me. I will be back in a couple weeks. So my homework to you is pick one of these AIs that you want to work with. I'd recommend Claude, but we'll be fair to ChatGPT. Play around with it. See where it fails you. Try to push it to its limit and experiment with it. Try to play with some of the context problems we talked about. So give it something with little context, give it with more context, but at the end of the day, have fun with it. You're gonna see lots of really interesting things pop out. And on that note, thank you so much.
Thank you. Very informative, yes.
Oh, thank you. Nice to meet you.
We had to take that. 10 students here.
So my great grandmother.